Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. As most of you probably know, I started this series of videos to expose the lie that Elliot Rodger was connected to the men's rights movement. But I am now expanding it to cover any falsehoods, misconceptions, misinformation, or outright lies spread about the MRM. So let's get stuck into it.
Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine.
First off, we have an article from a couple of weeks ago that appeared on the Drum from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Nice to see my tax dollars aren't being wasted. That's sarcasm, by the way. Anyway, the article is by Clementine Ford and is entitled "A Lesson for Men's Rights Activists on Real Oppression." Anytime a disparate system of power is equalized, one side must surrender some privileges that may upset men's rights activists, but it certainly doesn't mean feminism is subjugating men, writes Clementine Ford. Well, this doesn't sound biased at all. Let's continue. In a couple of weeks, an international conference on men's issues will be held in Detroit, Michigan. In an ideal world, such a thing would be an opportunity to discuss how dominant ideas of masculinity translates to limited opportunities for boys and men to express themselves. It might broach the subject of rates of male incarceration and recidivism, and how socioeconomic factors influence these things. It could look at how the reductive idea of male stoicism has a detrimental effect on mental health. In other words, men should only discuss their issues through the lens of feminism, which blames men, masculinity, and the make-believe patriarchy for all our issues. Well, my darling Clementine, I hate to break it to you, but not everyone agrees with your brand of ideological bullshit. Next. In the right hands, an international conference on men's issues has the potential to be both illuminating and life-changing. Unfortunately, as it's being hosted by A Voice for Men, a motley crew who espouse hatred and fear of women, it promises to be about as useful to the advancement of men's issues as a condom made out of sticky tape. Condoms are very important to the men's rights movement, because MRAs are convinced paternity fraud is a thing. They even have a nationally recognized expert speaking on the matter. You guys, it's not a thing. Oh my darling Clementine, are you serious? Are you suggesting that women never ever lie or cheat? Not even a small percentage? Are you really sure you want to make that argument? Let's look at the facts. Here is an article from The Australian, from 2011. Fathers demand mandatory paternity testing. A men's rights group has called for mandatory paternity testing of all babies after government figures revealed almost 600 instances of men compelled to financially support children they did not father. Since changes to child support laws 4 years ago, there had been 586 cases of men successfully using DNA testing to show they were not biologically related to children they had been financially supporting, the federal government has revealed to The Australian. In the overwhelming majority of these cases, the courts have not forced mothers to pay back the money they have received. Of the 586 cases, only 74 mothers have been told to pay back the money. Those reparations total in excess of $533,000. The figures, from the government's child support agency, prompted Men's Rights Agency Director Sue Price to call for mandatory DNA testing at birth. Quite a lot of them, the men, don't get their money back, she said. The mothers aren't working anyway, so there's no way of getting the money back. So yeah, Clem, almost 600 cases in just 4 years, is a thing. And that's not taking into account all the untested children out there. And if you consider that the population of America, where the Men's Rights Conference took place, is so much larger than the population of Australia, well, I think it's safe to say that the USA's comparative number would be vastly higher. That is assuming that American women are just as likely to cheat as Australian. And I'm not suggesting that all, or even the majority, of women are cheaters, just acknowledging that some women do cheat, and some fathers unknowingly raise children that are not their own. So yeah, my darling Clementine, it most definitely is a thing. Should we conclude that Clementine Ford either denies that women cheat, despite the obvious evidence to prove that some do, or are we to conclude that she simply does not care that men are being lied to, and are raising children who are not their own? So much for caring about men, hey Clem? Next. AVFM's founder, Paul Elam, is worryingly a former mental health service provider who has, among other egregious revelations, openly stated that if he ever sits on a jury of a rape trial, he'll vote to acquit on principle, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that the charges are true. This is because he believes America is overrun by a swath of false rape accusations and that the legal system is patently untrustworthy when it comes to the offense of rape. Not because only 3% of those accused of rape will ever be convicted, no, because not only is a guilty vote simply an enabling capitulation to systemic legal corruption, but also, in this, the age of misandry, not one aspect of a rape case can be trusted. The accuser cannot be trusted. Meanwhile, AVFM's managing editor, Dean Ismay, believes that domestic violence is not a gendered issue, and that his oppression is real because some women make more money than him. Okay, there are a lot of claims here, so let's break them down. I am going to start with the claim that only 3% of those accused of rape will ever be convicted. Wow, sounds pretty bad, right? Well, she has given us a link to the statistics, so instead of just taking her word for it, let's go and look for ourselves. Clementine's link takes us to RAINN, which stands for Rape, Abuse and Incest, National Network. Let's see what they have to say. Why will only 3 out of every 100 rapists serve time? The majority of sexual assault are not reported to the police. An average of 60% of assaults in the last 5 years were not reported. Those rapists, of course, will never spend a day in prison. But even when the crime is reported, it is unlikely to lead to an arrest and prosecution. Factoring in unreported rapes, only about 3% of rapists will ever serve a day in prison. Well, Clementine's claim has been proven false already. She claimed that only 3% of those accused of rape will ever be convicted. If 60% of rapes are not reported to the police, then how exactly are these rapists being accused? How exactly does Clementine expect these rapists to be convicted? How do we even know these rapes took place, or that these statistics are accurate? The 60% figure comes from surveys, like the much criticized one conducted by Mary Koss. But I tell you what, let's play devil's advocate for a moment, and assume that only 40% of rapes are reported. Let's assume that the statistics supplied are in fact accurate, and see what conclusions we can come up with. As only 40% are reported, then we can only expect a conviction out of that 40%. Obviously, police can't arrest and convict someone if the rape is not reported. RAINN gives us a chart about those 40% of reported rapes. Let's have a look. So out of the 40, 10 get arrested. Out of the 10, 8 get prosecuted. Out of the 8, 4 leads to a felony conviction. Out of the 4, 3 get jail time. Then down the bottom it says, the other 97 will walk free. I will tackle this claim later, but for now, let's break down this 40 number. So out of every 40 reported rapes, why would there only be 10 arrests? Let's start with false allegations, and yes, they do happen. Just this week, there was a conviction after a false allegation. Trainee barrister Rhiannon Brooker jailed for falsely accusing boyfriend of rape. A trainee barrister who falsely accused her boyfriend of rape and faked injuries to make it appear he had beaten her has been jailed for 3.5 years. Rhiannon Brooker, 30, was found guilty of 12 charges of perverting the course of justice at Bristol Crown Court and was sentenced on Thursday. She falsely claimed Paul Fensom, 46, forced her to have sex with him 5 times and alleged he caused her to have a miscarriage by punching her in the stomach. He could have faced a lengthy prison sentence if convicted of the alleged 5 rapes, 6 assaults and 1 charge of false imprisonment between April 2009 and August 2011. The court heard Brooker falsified the wicked allegations so she would have an excuse for failing her legal exams at the University of the West of England in Bristol. She repeatedly told tutors at the university that her performance suffered from extenuating circumstances. Her boyfriend, Mr. Fensom, was arrested, charged and held in custody for more than 5 weeks before police confirmed his alibis for the accusations. When phone records and work rosters from his job as a railway signalman proved he could not have committed the attacks, Brooker signed a statement admitting the allegations were false. This isn't the only case of its type, by the way. The worst one I recall hearing was compulsive liar jailed after 11 false rape claims in decade. A compulsive liar made almost a dozen false claims that she was raped in nearly a decade after making her first complaint at the age of 13, a court has heard. Elizabeth Jones, 22, admitted she lied about the latest rape allegation because she did not like the man she accused of attacking her, Southampton Crown Court was told. Her latest victim, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was arrested and questioned for 9 hours before being released without charge. After a judge jailed her for 16 months, it emerged today that she made her first complaint in 2004, aged just 13, before alleging other men had attacked her over the next 9 years. In 2009 she was given a 10-month detention and training order for a similar offense. Between 2005 and 2007 she had made 8 other allegations, which police investigated, but she was never charged. In the latest incident, Hampshire police launched an investigation after Jones, from Southampton, Hants, urged an unidentified friend to report she had been assaulted. She later went to the police station for a medical examination and repeated the false allegation. Jenny Rickman, prosecuting, told the court that a man was arrested but he denied the rape allegation. Detectives later viewed CCTV covering part of the house in which Jones claimed to have been attacked, which did not support her story as it showed she was not forcibly taken there. There is a history of her making false allegations of this nature, and this is the 11th incident, she said. Police had to take her allegations seriously and carried out an appropriate investigation. She was later arrested and accepted she had lied about being raped. She said she did it because she did not like him. Jones admitted one count of attempting to pervert the course of justice. Jailing her for 16 months, Judge Derwin Hope said her offenses had caused a terrible emotional experience to her alleged attacker. Now, I am not saying that all rape victims are lying, or even that the majority are liars. I am just pointing out that it is a factor that must be considered. To be honest with you, I don't know what percentage of rape allegations are false. I have heard everything from 3% to around 40%. I don't know what the actual number is, and neither does anyone else, as it's virtually impossible to get accurate statistics. But for the sake of this video, I am going to go with a number that has been quoted to me ad nauseum by feminists, and that's the 8% figure. Once again, I am not claiming this figure is 100% correct, just that it is often used in discussions I have been part of with feminists. Using this figure, there are over 8,000 innocent people accused of rape every year in the United States. Not only do false accusers often destroy these people's lives, but it also makes it harder for real victims to be taken serious, or even to come forward. False accusers should be condemned by everyone. So let's calculate 8% of 40, and we get around 3, which is the same percentage of convicted rapists serving time, using rainn statistics. So let's subtract 3 from 30, and we still have 27 accused rapists out of 30 not being arrested. Well, there are a number of other factors that could account for this number. For example, I made a video a few months ago called, Guilty Until Proven Innocent, link below, in which I talk about a university student being suspended from university, based on an allegation of rape. In case you haven't watched that video, I will quickly cover the story. The alleged victim, instead of going to the police, went to the university. The university took months to come to the conclusion that the alleged rapist should be suspended. The alleged victim wasn't happy with this result, so after 7 months, went to the police. Providence police urged student victims of sexual assault to report crime immediately. There is a very short window in which we can obtain evidence of a sexual assault crime, Providence Police Major David A. Loperton said Thursday, and we need to be notified as soon as possible. The police did not receive a report about the alleged rape at Brown until nearly 7 months after it occurred, Loperton said, so that any physical evidence may have been lost with time. What exactly are the police meant to do in this circumstance? 7 months after the assault, with no physical evidence, and no witnesses. All they have to go on is her word. I have no idea how common, or uncommon, this type of incident is, but it would have to impact somewhat on the 27 out of 30 remaining unarrested accused rapists. But let's look at another scenario. Imagine a beaten and bloody woman limps into a hospital just after being raped. Her injuries are severe and obvious. A rape kit is taken, showing clear signs of rape. This type of case should be easy to get a conviction with, right? I mean, unlike the previous case where evidence was lacking, in this case it's abundant and obvious. But what if she was raped by a stranger? What if it was night? What if she didn't get a good look at him? What if she had been drinking and her recollection was impaired? Even if there is abundant and obvious evidence, police still have to find and arrest the rapist before he can be convicted. To do that they need to identify him, and locate him, which is not always possible. I often hear that most rapes are committed by someone known to the victim, and I suspect this is true, but there are also cases where the rapist is unknown, and this would also impact the 27 out of 30 accused rapists that aren't arrested. But if most rapists are known by their victim, then identification shouldn't be a major factor in arresting accused rapists, and surely late reporting, or the attacker being unknown can't account for all 27 out of 30. So there must be many cases where there is physical evidence, the rape is reported straight away, and the alleged rapist is known by the alleged victim, right? Well, even in these cases, it isn't always easy to prove rape. In many cases, a rape kit will confirm that sex has taken place, and a DNA test will confirm who the alleged rapist is, but by itself it does not prove or disprove that the sex was consensual or non-consensual. There may be additional evidence, such as bruising, ripped clothing, witnesses, video or photographs. Without this additional evidence, you often have a case of one person claiming the sex was consensual, and the other claiming that it wasn't. Once again, let me stress that the rape kit confirms that sex took place, but not always that rape took place. Evidence of sex alone is not evidence of rape. And a person's word is not enough, or at least, should not be enough, to get another person convicted. You need to prove that 1. A crime did in fact take place, and 2. That the accused committed the crime. Rape can be extremely hard to prove. In most cases, there are no witnesses, or video evidence, or photos, and even if you can prove sex took place, you still have to prove that the sexual act was not consensual. In many cases this comes down to one person's word against another's. And I think I can safely say, all these things account for most, if not all, of the 27 out of 30 not being arrested. If there is no evidence, or insufficient evidence, or the accused can't be identified or located, then it's very unlikely there is going to be an arrest or a conviction. But let's see what the Justicar has to say about it.
Of those rapes that are reported, only a very small percentage ever make their way to trial.
Yes, and that's the same reason that for any crime that is reported, a very small percentage of those crimes, of those cases, actually make it to trial. Why is that? Because the overwhelming majority of criminal convictions that happen in the United States come incident to a plea bargain. Only it's something like, I can't remember, it's 5 or 15% of charges that are brought result in a trial happening. Most of them are settled by way of a plea bargain. The person's like, okay, look, I'm willing to spare the state the expense of a trial. I'm actually guilty. I'm willing to spare the state the expense of a trial. Prosecutor, what are you willing to do? Well, we're willing to knock it down to some lesser offense because it really helps us with our bottom line, the efficiency of the judicial system, all these other things. That's how the majority of criminal cases are resolved in the United States. Very, very few of them go to trial. It should not be surprising that rape is not different than all of the other crimes that happen.
Only between 2 and 5% of reported rapes lead to conviction. One reason these percentages are so long is that irrelevant and prejudicial information about the rape victim's past history is still introduced as evidence in trials, and this has led to biased verdicts, which in turn has made rape victims
a biased verdict. That is to say that defense counsel were able to, in some cases, raise an amount of doubt that is sufficient for a jury to not be confident that what was claimed to have happened actually did happen, such that now they're going to say, state, you may claim ownership over this person's body for whatever length of time and do certain bad things to him. That the system that we have is not to reward criminals, though some criminals will actually get a windfall. That's just an unintended consequence, an unfortunate consequence of having burdens of proof and levels of evidence that have to be met before the state is able to step in and do horrible things to people. Why? Well, you have the citizens and the government. And among the citizens, you will have some people who are perpetrators of crimes and some people who are victims of crimes. The people who are victims of crimes are victims of the conduct of third parties, of private citizens. And what the United States system is, it says, well, we can't stop all bad things that happen. But the one thing that we can do is we can prevent the government itself from becoming the agent of doing those bad, unjustified things to innocent citizens. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is establish certain rules that government, you may not do these horrible things to people until some particular level of evidence has been met, such that it is beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did do a bad thing, and now you can justifiably do bad things to that person because of their past actions. The criminal defense system that we have is meant to retard the government from being the agent of oppression. It is not to stop all bad things from happening. No one can do that.
A link to the Justicar's video is below, and if you haven't checked out his channel, you should. Anyway, the point is that so few rapists are convicted, because often it is a hard crime to prove. Not because of patriarchy, not because of misogyny, and not because of rape culture. But I do have one more point to make about the rainn statistics. Remember I said that I would return to the claim at the bottom, which stated, the other 97 will walk free. This claim is also incorrect. Once again, I am playing devil's advocate here, and using rainn statistics. I am not claiming that 60 out of every 100 rapes are not reported is factual. If we accept that 97 out of every 100 rapists walks free, then we would have to accept that for every 100 rapes, there are 100 rapists. In other words, a rapist rapes once, then for some reason, stops, and never does it again. This of course, isn't backed up by the facts. Repeat rape and multiple offending among undetected rapists. Abstract. Pooling data from 4 samples in which 1,882 men were assessed for acts of interpersonal violence, we report on 120 men whose self-reported acts met legal definitions of rape or attempted rape, but who were never prosecuted by criminal justice authorities. A majority of these undetected rapists were repeat rapists, and a majority also committed other acts of interpersonal violence. The repeat rapists averaged 5.8 rapes each. The 120 rapists were responsible for 1,225 separate acts of interpersonal violence, including rape, battery, and child physical and sexual abuse. These findings mirror those from studies of incarcerated sex offenders Abel, Becker, Middleman, Cunningham, Rathner, Rillo, and Murphy, 1987. Weinrod and Saylor, 1991, indicating high rates of both repeat rape and multiple types of offending. Implications for the investigation and prosecution of this so-called hidden rape are discussed. So no rainn, it clearly isn't 97 out of every 100 rapists who walk free, but instead a smaller percentage of rapists, committing multiple crimes. And when these crimes aren't so much as reported, there is very little to stop them from committing more. If your average rapist commits 5 rapes, then 3 out of every 20 rapists ends up in prison, meaning that rainn's figure should be 17 out of every 100 rapists walks free, or 97 out of every 100 rapes doesn't end in punishment for the rapist. Just a disclaimer before I go on. All these figures are dodgy at best. Rape statistics are never reliable as they are nearly always used to support ideology. All I have tried to do here is to interpret and, using logic, give some alternative scenarios to the feminist rhetoric. Feel free to comment below about the subject. And I also acknowledge that women can be sex offenders, and males victims as well. Anyone who has watched my body of work should be aware of this. But dealing with these particular claims and statistics, we are predominantly dealing with male-of-female rape. No doubt that if female-on-male rape was properly recognized, these stats would vastly change yet again. Like I said, just about all rape statistics are dodgy for one reason or another. Next. Now to my darling Clementine's claims about Paul Elam. Did he in fact say those things in an article? The answer is yes. Having read the entire article, and not just the quote, I can understand the point Paul was trying to make, that the court system is unfair towards men accused of rape. I can even agree with this point, but considering the number of times that particular quote has been used against him, I have to say, it's just giving the other side ammo to use against us. But, I'm not here to speak for Paul Elam, it's much better if he does that himself. Whereas feminists lament what they call a rape culture in today's society, we actually live in a false rape culture, and it is in growth mode. It seems every day there is a news story about a man freed from prison after being falsely convicted. Just recently, 2 Texas men were released from prison who had been falsely convicted of rape in separate incidents. One had served 27 years, the other 19. That's 2 men, at the same time, not just from the same state, but from the same city. Both men were from Houston, and their stories are being repeated around the country, revealing a somber reality that continues unimpeded. There are a lot of innocent men in prison for the crime of rape. And much worse, our capacity to identify and exonerate them is overwhelmingly exceeded by an unjust legal system that continues to put them there. And the editorial note states, Editorial note, in the early years of A Voice for Men, when it first started, deliberately inflammatory articles were often written in order to shake people out of their comfortable sensibilities and confront brutal realities they just did not want to see. This tiny handful of old articles is cited time and again by dishonest critics of the men's human rights movement literature as typical and the sort of thing you see all the time or in a steady stream, when, rather tellingly, these are almost always articles at least a few years old and actually rather unusual. In this particularly controversial essay, Paul Elam asks a provocative question: if you truly believe you cannot trust cops, prosecutors, or judges to make sure you get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, when you know indeed they may outright fabricate evidence as well as hide evidence that would set an innocent man free, how can you in good conscience trust anything you see in a court of law, no matter how damning the evidence might look? It is an uncomfortable question, but it is rather telling that in the years since this was written, almost everyone continues to bring up this old article without ever addressing the substance of it, but instead merely angrily and dishonestly characterizing it as Paul Elam says men should get away with rape, when what he actually says could not be more clear: cops, prosecutors, and judges lie, and until the system changes, how can you in good conscience convict a man of practically anything? Until the system is reformed, it would seem to us that a growing number of people are going to come to the same uncomfortable conclusions Elam does here, and although not everyone in the men's human rights movement endorses this view, it is telling that most reactions to it are emotional and not logical, and what most frequently happens is the whole thing is misinterpreted as rape apologia rather than what it is, an indictment of a corrupt criminal justice system. I will link both the original article, and the addendum article, and let you make up your own mind. Next. And now onto the claims about Dean May. Firstly, Dean is correct, domestic violence should not be a gendered issue. Yes, males do it to females. But females also do it to males. And even same-sex couples do it to each other. Gender should not be a determining factor as to someone's guilt. Unfortunately, the authorities in society don't seem to see it that way, and tend to go by the assumption that males are always the perpetrators, and females the victims. As for Dean claiming to be oppressed by women who earn more, well, I don't ever recall Dean claiming to be oppressed. I suspect he was trying to make the point that he isn't automatically more privileged than every woman on the planet, simply because he has a penis. It's not a hard claim to understand. I've made it myself in the past when discussing the large number of homeless males. They are clearly not more privileged than a middle to upper class, well-educated woman, with a well-paying job. Assuming that everyone in Group A is more privileged than everyone in Group B, despite their individual circumstances, is ludicrous. Anyway, I think that would have been Dean's point, but if I'm wrong, Dean, please correct me below. And by the way, the word oppression is something typically used by feminists and social justice warriors, not MRAs, unless we are replying to their batshit claims, of course. Okay, I need to take a break from my darling Clementine, but we will return to the rest of the article later.
We have been covering the men's rights activist beat on this show I would say like no other.
No. And by covering the men's rights conference, what he means, as he is about to demonstrate, is that he has read a couple of online articles about it. I would think, if you were actually interested in covering an event, as opposed to just condemning it outright, you might actually watch at least some of the footage posted online. But I guess that would actually take effort, wouldn't it? I guess it's just easier to be lazy. Good job, guys. Good job.
We, speaking of Michael and myself, have been bringing you what an MRA is, when they've ever been in the news, for example, with that horrific shooting over in California with Elliot Rodgers.
You're a big fat liar!
Oh no, not even 30 seconds in, and already we have the bullshit Elliot Rodger connection.
Yep. And then the scary MRA type, just brainwashing that goes on with people like Stéphane Molyneux.
Stéphane Molyneux is into brainwashing? Really? I wonder why they failed to give us at least one example.
Jeez. And this past weekend, in Detroit, or just outside Detroit it seems, there was the first ever men's rights activist conference held by a Voice for Men. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with A Voice for Men, they call themselves an online hub for men's rights activists, and they were founded by a man named Paul Elam. And if you're wondering who Paul Elam is most known for, he's most known for an article that came out in October where basically he wrote a piece declaring the month of October to be Bash a Violent Bitch Month.
Once again, we have an example of someone reading a handful of quotes from online articles, and not bothering to look at the context of the quotes, as the story behind them is a little more complex. The AVFM article in question is called, "If You See Jezebel in the Road, Run the Bitch Down," and was a response to a Jezebel article, so we should look at that one first to understand context. The Jezebel article was called, "Have You Ever Beat Up a Boyfriend?" Cause, we have. Links to both articles, as always, are below. The Jezebel article states, according to a study of relationships that engage in non-reciprocal violence, a whopping 70% are perpetrated by women. So basically that means that girls are beating up their BFs and husbands and the dudes aren't fighting back. With Amy Winehouse busting open a can of whoop-ass on her husband last week, we decided to conduct an informal survey of the Jezebels to see who's gotten violent with their men. After reviewing the answers, let's just say that it'd be wise to never ever fuck with us. One Jezebel got into it with a dude while they were breaking up, while another Jez went nuts on her guy and began violently shoving him. One of your editors heard her boyfriend flirting on the phone with another girl, so she slapped the phone out of his hands and hit him in the face and neck. Partially open-handed. Another editor slapped a guy when he told me he thought he had breast cancer. Okay, that one made us laugh really hard. And lastly, one Jez punched a study in the face and broke his glasses. He had discovered a sex story she was writing about another dude on her laptop, so he picked it up and threw it. And that's when she socked him. He was, totally asking for it. Remember guys, feminism is about equality. So this feminist article is making fun of male domestic abuse victims who don't fight back against their attackers. This is important for context. Let's look at the AVFM article. And we have a resurrected article from August of 7, from the women at Jezebel.com, tip of the hat to the illustrious Dr. Snark, demonstrating how unrepentantly violent they really are, and how much they seem to enjoy it. Senior writer Tracy Egan Morrissey penned the article, which addresses research findings reported in Psychiatric News that, in fact, when it comes to non-reciprocal violence between intimate partners, women are more often the perpetrators. And of course the comment section that follows the article backs up her pro-abuse attitude toward men. It is replete with women regaling us with stories of how they, not satire, kicked, hit, smashed and bloodied their boyfriends for doing the sometimes annoying things that men do. One woman reported that she punched her ex in the face for having the audacity to get another girlfriend after they broke up. Fog alert. Satire. That's it. In the name of equality and fairness, I am proclaiming October to be Bash a Violent Bitch Month. I'd like to make it the objective for the remainder of this month, and all the Octobers that follow, for men who are being attacked and physically abused by women, to beat the living shit out of them. I don't mean subdue them, or deliver an open-handed pop on the face to get them to settle down. I mean literally to grab them by the hair and smack their face against the wall till the smugness of beating on someone because you know they won fight back drains from their nose with a few million red corpuscles. I have to say, I agree with Paul. I personally have never hit a woman, but if I was violently attacked by one, I would defend myself. Of course, just the act of defending myself would be enough to get me in trouble with the law. The Jezebel article is sickening, yet I know of no media outlet, apart from AVFM, to ever stand up and say, this is bullshit. And those media outlets that have used Paul's quote, must have read the article, and not only know its actual context, but be aware of the Jezebel article. That is, of course, excluding those so-called journalists, who simply cut and paste quotes from other so-called journalists. To condemn the AVFM article, while remaining silent about the Jezebel article, is hypocritical at best, and totally biased propaganda at worst. But let's hear the quote from Sam Sater again.
Declaring the month of October to be Bash a Violent Bitch Month.
Please note that he said here, Bash a Violent Bitch Month. Note he used the word violent. This is relevant in a minute.
Jesus.
I mean, literally to grab them by the hair and smack their face against the wall, he wrote. His site was mentioned previously in a 2012 Southern Poverty Law Center intelligence report about misogynistic websites.
A Voice for Male Students does a good job at explaining this, once again link below. SPLC dropped from FBI list of authoritative resources on hate groups. It had to happen at some point. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the Fallen from Grace organization which Reason magazine has quite accurately characterized as one that would paint a box of Wheaties as an extremist threat if it thought that would help it raise funds, has been officially dropped from its time-honored position on the FBI list of authoritative resources concerning hate groups. While the SPLC originally did good work in the 1970s and occasionally still does today, in the last decade it has devolved into simply an extreme left political attack group, riding on a tide of donations from gullible and paranoid devotees and shouting hate speech. To anyone who happens to think differently from them about anything. The SPLC's integrity in regards to its treatment of the rise of men's issues groups and websites over the past 5 years is sketchy at best. In the spring of 2012, the SPLC created a list titled Misogyny, the sites which attempted to address hatred in the manosphere. While some sites on the list actually did harbor suspicious attitudes toward women, the SPLC went too far in most cases, listing benevolent organizations like Stop Abusive and Violent Environments, Save and PUA pickup artist websites that have nothing to do with the men's human rights movement. The SPLC's initial list was published a full year and a half before the site was launched, but they finally got around to addressing it. Late last year the SPLC published an article on their website which made a pitiable attempt to link this site to extreme right-wing groups. Rather than paint this site in a negative light, however, it had the opposite effect. Many people rallied to defend AVFM's including a voice for men, my comments on the SPLC article were overwhelmingly voted up, and traffic to the site increased substantially. When it became clear that the SPLC didn't have a leg to stand on, they resorted to mass censorship by deleting over 100 comments by men's advocates on their article, which backfired by drawing even more negative attention their way. I would also like to point out that the SPLC, to my knowledge, have never condemned feminist websites like Jezebel or RadFemHub when it was still around. But I guess hate groups towards men is okay, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah. He later came out and said he was being satirical and removed the post. Yeah, so fucking funny.
Hilarious.
So back to this men's rights conference that this wonderful Bash a Bitch Month author.
Notice he has now dropped the word violent, suggesting that the article was aimed at women in general, and not women who are initiating violence toward men. This is the way he refers to the quote from now on.
Put together. So basically, both MSNBC's Adam Sewer and Washington Post's Monica Hess went down there, and they both found some interesting characters. Erin Pizzey, the British founder of one of the first domestic violence shelters and a staunch anti-feminist, had this to say about feminists and feminism, which they blame for everything pretty much.
You mean like trying to stop the conference? How strange that men's rights activist would dislike the very people trying to silence them.
Anyway, to give you a sense, I'll get to some more of these quotes, but to give you a sense of what the MRA say this is about, they say the conference comes, basically to air their grievances. How, fathers have to navigate family court systems that unfairly privilege mothers in divorce.
Oh, man.
And boys are failing in education. And they worry about the high unemployment rate among men and the fact that men are more likely to commit suicide. And they argue about domestic and sexual violence against men and how it's underplayed in the media and how men are unfairly stereotyped as violent sexual predators and how, women are valued and protected in society while men are not.
Note the condescending attitude.
And the thing is, they really don't bring up any of these issues. Some are decent issues, others not so much, but they don't bring up any of these issues during this conference. This conference ended up being a 100% sexist, misogynistic, anti-feminism, anti-woman fest.
Anti-woman? Is that why 1/3 of the speakers were female? Once again, let me point out that it's obvious this guy has not seen any of the footage from the conference, but has formed his entire opinion from a couple of online articles. Need I say it? Being anti-feminist is not the same as being anti-woman. And anyone who claims the two are the same is an idiot.
Right.
I mean, that's what it turned
With
into.
a ton of whining.
Oh, a ton
Man,
of whining.
These guys are so whiny. It's incredible.
They admit that at least some of the issues are reasonable, but then classify talking about them as whiny. Remember, this is coming from two guys who have not watched any footage from the conference.
Now, originally, apparently, the original venue for the conference was the Doubletree Hilton. And the interesting thing about the Doubletree Hilton was that they said they picked it because it is an iconic testament to masculinity. Anyway, they ended up having to move it from the Doubletree Hilton. They claim after death threats from feminists.
Oh, yeah.
And the Doubletree Hilton basically isn't really saying much about it, except that there were some obligations in their contract that the men's rights activists were unable to adhere to. So
the feminists
so
got to them.
So the conference was moved to the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall in St. Clair Shores.
Well, that sounds pretty masculine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good.
They ended up saying that
It's not a real man's
the
place.
organizers ended up arguing that it was even more appropriate and even more masculine of a location.
That's right. Even more.
Oh, man.
You know what's really masculine? Saying even more masculine.
Even more masculine, yeah.
That's so masculine.
so I am at the peak of masculinity, Michael. I really.
I got a mangina! Come on, Greg!
I'm so masculine right now. It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just like that, he unveiled his beautiful man pussy, his glorious mangina.
Exactly. Conference speakers referred several times to threats of violence at the event, but no protest at the VFW hall ever materialized. Amanda Levitt, a feminist activist who was protesting and contacting the hotel, trying to get them not to hold the conference, did say that due to concerns for our physical safety, we decided that the best way to oppose the conference that's now going on at the VFW hall is to keep away.
So let's have a quick look at some past feminist protests.
You know, it's the signature of a totalitarian ideology to attempt to quash dissent. So every time you interrupt, you're merely showing your repressive tendencies. You're not showing anything about your virtue. Okay, let's forget it. There's no point.
Those clips were from protests in Canada, where feminists have used their unique brand of thuggery to shut down anyone they disagree with. So much for free speech. And some people actually wonder why feminists get labeled as fascists. But they are even worse in Argentina. You'll notice in that clip that the men were perfectly peaceful, yet they were not only spat on, but some of the feminists attempted to spray paint them in the eyes. Can someone, anyone, just name one MRA protest, or even a lone MRA protester, who has done anything like this? Being fearful for their safety was not the reason the feminists didn't protest the conference. It was because they knew there would be cameras there, and they knew their bad antics would spread across the internet and expose them once again. Claiming they were in fear for their safety is laughable. Next.
But let's get to some more of these quotes, because they are really, as Monica Hess in the Washington Post points out, that she noticed that they were mostly white, college through retirement aged males in attendance. I mean, no surprise there.
Well, considering that 3/4 of America is white, I would expect the majority of the audience to be white. Wouldn't that be logical? If there was a men's rights conference held in India, would you not expect the majority of the attendees to be Indian? If there was a men's rights conference held in Japan, would you not expect the majority of the attendees to be Asian? And as it was a men's rights conference, would you not expect there to be a lot of men there? How exactly is any of this a problem? There were no restrictions on attendees as far as race, gender, or sexual orientation. And there were people of all races, genders and sexual orientation attending. I have to wonder what the social justice warriors, feminists, and aspects of the media expected the organizers to do? Should they have bussed in 70 black women at gunpoint? Just to make the conference less white, and less male? Fucking crazy, seriously, this shit is fucking crazy.
One man talked about his ex-wife. A lot of guys actually talked about their ex-wives and ex-girlfriends. and that these experiences, she noticed, was often cited as the catalyst to these men's realizations that the world had become a hostile and dangerous place for them. Oh, really? I mean, really, it really is.
Yeah, laugh it up, fuckwit. Considering the already high male suicide rate skyrockets during divorce, I would think that anyone, even with the lowest level of intellect, could grasp the notion that something is seriously wrong with the divorce system. Let's hope these guys find out firsthand one day. It might be the only thing to open their eyes.
I mean, many of the issues that came up was paternity fraud, circumcision, false rape allegations. They are so hurt, you know?
So in other words, because the things listed don't affect women, they don't matter.
Hey, I can't rape a woman without her accusing me of rape. I mean, it's...
Clearly this moron doesn't understand the meaning of the word false.
I find this fascinating. Like, I don't, you know, I don't even know how to articulate it. I just feel like, I don't know. Take a dude like me. I would politically, I definitely consider myself a feminist, right?
Yes, of course.
I have never, ever been in a relationship with, in this case, obviously, like a romantic relationship, whatever, where I've ever felt like they have all the power. That's just never even occurred to me. And it's just so interesting that these guys who are so obsessed with, like, these hierarchies, they clearly feel just so weak and so small. It's incredible.
It's actually sort of sad, because here's another quote.
It is kind of sad.
During an event, an after-party event at a bar, a bunch of men were talking, and he was talking about basically why all women are cruel. And he brought up an experience he had with his ex-wife. One time I told her that I wished I was 6 feet tall. And from then on, whenever I walked past her, she called me short. I mean,
that is kind of a dick move.
That is a dick move. But that scenario where this one guy had a tiny bad experience. I mean, and on the big picture, yes, it's emotionally abusive if she's saying it all the time, and this is coming from your wife at the time. But I mean, compared to what most women go through in abusive relationships, where they fear for their life, it's relatively small. And I'm not saying it's okay, but let's put it in perspective here. And the fact that this man uses that event as the catalyst that turns him into someone who hates all women to the point where he is one of about 100 attendees at this event.
Once again, need I point out that 1/3 of the presenters were female.
Before I get started, I would first like to say thank you to whoever it was that scheduled me to follow the legendary Aaron Pizzi and Senator Cools. Thanks. No pressure at all. Second, I would like to point out that I am the third presenter to speak at the first annual International Men's Human Rights Conference, and that would be the third woman presenter. My, aren't we an interesting group of misogynists? I hate to tell you guys, but I think we might be doing it wrong.
Wow, you can just hear the hate in the room. I have to say, I think Dr. T is great. She always has the perfect mix of intellect and humor. If you see this Dr. T, keep up the good work. Now back to the idiots.
She said that included in this is fathers being portrayed as doofuses in sitcoms, really pressing issues.
Huge.
And a commercial that aired during the Olympics honoring moms of athletes, but not dads!
Yeah, what the hell?
And to give you an example of, on this scale, what she also brings up, rape on college campuses, Kay says, was a myth perpetuated by man-haters in the concept of rape culture. How society can tactically approve of or rationalize sexual assault was baseless moral panic. The vast majority of female students, she said, allegedly raped on campus are actually voicing buyer's remorse from alcohol-fueled promiscuous behavior involving murky lines of consent on both sides. She said, drawing chuckles from the audience. It's true. It's their get-out-of-guilt-free card, like Monopoly.
Remember rainn from earlier, the group that is forever being quoted by feminists on the topic of rape? Well, that is, until they sent this report to the government. Perpetrators of campus sexual assault, what we know. In the last few years, there has been an unfortunate trend towards blaming rape culture for the extensive problem of sexual violence on campuses. While it is helpful to point out the systemic barriers to addressing the problem, it is important to not lose sight of a simple fact: rape is caused not by cultural factors but by the conscious decisions of a small percentage of the community to commit a violent crime. While it may seem an obvious point, it has tended to get lost in recent debates. This has led to an inclination to focus on particular segments of the student population, for example, athletes, particular aspects of campus culture, for example, the Greek system, or traits that are common in many millions of law-abiding Americans, for example, masculinity, rather than on the subpopulation at fault, those who choose to commit rape. This trend has the paradoxical effect of making it harder to stop sexual violence, since it removes the focus from the individual at fault, and seemingly mitigates personal responsibility for his or her own actions. So even rainn doesn't believe in rape culture, but they are not the only ones to change their tune. Here is an article from the Wall Street Journal, by feminist Judith Grossman. Judith Grossman, a mother, a feminist, aghast. Unsubstantiated accusations against my son by a former girlfriend landed him before a nightmarish college tribunal. But that was before my son, a senior at a small liberal arts college in New England, was charged by an ex-girlfriend with alleged acts of non-consensual sex that supposedly occurred during the course of their relationship a few years earlier. What followed was a nightmare, a fall through Alice's looking glass into a world that I could not possibly have believed existed, least of all behind the ivy-covered walls thought to protect an ostensible dedication to enlightenment and intellectual betterment. It began with a text of desperation. "Call me. Urgent. Now." That was how my son informed me that not only had charges been brought against him but that he was ordered to appear to answer these allegations in a matter of days. There was no preliminary inquiry on the part of anyone at the school into these accusations about behavior alleged to have taken place a few years earlier, no consideration of the possibility that jealousy or revenge might be motivating a spurned young ex-lover to lash out. Worst of all, my son would not be afforded a presumption of innocence. My son was given written notice of the charges against him, in the form of a letter from the campus Title IX officer. But instead of affording him the right to be fully informed, the separately listed allegations were a barrage of vague statements, rendering any defense virtually impossible. The letter lacked even the most basic information about the acts alleged to have happened years before. Nor were the allegations supported by any evidence other than the word of the ex-girlfriend. The hearing itself was a 2-hour ordeal of unabated grilling by the school's committee, during which, my son later reported, he was expressly denied his request to be represented by counsel or even to have an attorney outside the door of the room. The questioning, he said, ran far afield even from the vaguely stated allegations contained in the so-called notice. Questions from the distant past, even about unrelated matters, were flung at him with no opportunity for him to give thoughtful answers. The many pages of written documentation that my son had put together which were directly on point about his relationship with his accuser during the time period of his alleged wrongful conduct were dismissed as somehow not relevant. What was relevant, however, according to the committee, was the unsworn testimony of witnesses deemed to have observable knowledge about the long-ago relationship between my son and his accuser. Across the country and with increasing frequency, innocent victims of impossible-to-substantiate charges are afforded scant rights to fundamental fairness and find themselves entrapped in a widening web of this latest surge in political correctness. Few have a lawyer for a mother, and many may not know about the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which assisted me in my research. There are very real and horrifying instances of sexual misconduct and abuse on college campuses and elsewhere. That these offenses should be investigated and prosecuted where appropriate is not open to question. What does remain a question is how we can make the process fair for everyone. I fear that in the current climate the goal of women's rights, with the compliance of politically motivated government policy and the tacit complicity of college administrators, runs the risk of grounding our most cherished institutions in a veritable snake pit of injustice not unlike the very injustices the movement itself has for so long sought to correct. Unbridled feminist orthodoxy is no more the answer than are attitudes and policies that victimize the victim. It seems that even some feminists agree there is a problem. There has been an increasing number of false rape claims on campus in recent years. That's not to say that all claims are false, but there is abundant evidence that some are. When somebody can make an allegation, without evidence, and without any consequences when it's proven false, you can expect an ever-increasing number of false claims. And then, there is this.
And I'll be honest with you, we've had an occasion for someone to accuse someone of sexual harassment or assault, and we find that they were just mad because they got a D in the class.
Oh, they did to a teacher? Wow. I feel sorry for that teacher.
And they go through a nightmare while we do the investigation because we look under every rock.
Yeah, you have to.
And so it's not pretty. Not at all. And the sad part is the person that did the accusing didn't even get a slap on the wrist.
What happened? Or they didn't, they just
walked away.
Are there no, like,
We don't have anything in place in this university to address false accusations.
Really? Man. So
it's in the works, though.
Really?
Because it can ruin someone's career.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And
or if they get expelled in May or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, it's an actual policy that's being discussed right now?
I don't know that it's a policy as much as a practice.
Oh, okay. So an informal something or another that's kind of bubbling, increasingly bubbling to the surface or something? Okay.
And we find that in discussing it with lots of other universities and colleges, as well as even in the secondary school systems, they don't have anything to respond to false accusations either.
If you can believe that some men are depraved enough to rape, then why should it be so hard to believe that some women are depraved enough to lie? Unless you believe that all women are born morally superior to all men, of course. Rape and false allegations on campus is a conversation we all need to have. Next.
Oh, and they also made light of the Bring Back Our Girls hashtag. Because, again, women. Women, you know.
My head, I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
Once again, the idiot misses the point. When girls were kidnapped, the entirety of the Western media went into overdrive, and everyone was outraged. Yet just months before, when the same group attacked a school and killed 59 boys, many burned to death, there was hardly a peep out of Western media. It seems that kidnapped girls are more important than slaughtered boys.
You know, when these guys are talking, to end this story here, when these guys are talking about wanting shared custody with children, and, how they want to reshape culture so that it's acceptable for men to be the primary caregivers and women can be the breadwinners. And when they talk about how, they want to raise this awareness that we're sending off our soldiers, who are mostly boys, off to die in wars, this isn't a men's rights issue. They sound like feminists!
Right. Actually, all feminists want to do is to blame men's issues solely on men. Besides, why should feminism hold the monopoly on solving problems?
But their hatred for feminism, because they've had their own personal bad experience with women, because 9 out of 10 times, they were the douchebag.
And here we see a derailing tactic. Instead of discussing the real issues, which he clearly knows exist, he instead creates a straw man of a hurt and lonely loser to attack. This kind of argument is no better than saying, feminists are only feminists because they have penis envy.
And it's just, it's sad.
It's really sad, that's it.
Because these guys are dangerous. Because they do stoke a fire inside people who have had a bad experience with women. For example, the California mass school shooter, Elliot Rodger.
You're a big fat liar!
And the human dirtbag finishes strong, with yet another repetition of the Elliot Rodger bullshit. Well, that's enough of this guy for now, but you will see him again later. There is also an interesting update. By the way, dude, 1971 called, it wants its hairstyle back. Well guys, I'm over the hour mark, and I still have a lot of bullshit to get through before I am done. So if you have had enough for now, and it's understandable if you have, might I suggest you click on the watch later button, around here somewhere, and YouTube should save the point you are up to, and if for some reason it doesn't, you know that you are just over the hour mark. As for you brave souls who wish to continue with me, on this journey presently, might I recommend you get up, stretch your legs, and get a stiff drink. Here is a short intermission for you to decide. Okay, time to get back to my darling Clementine. There's nothing wrong with taking an interest in men's issues, but the concept of men's rights is less about equality between the sexes than it is about maintaining power and privilege over women. MRAs, or men's rights activists, don't focus their attention on the structural powers that reinforce rigid expressions of masculinity, or advocate for a world in which men aren't unreasonably charged with the sole responsibility of being leaders, soldiers and providers. Instead, they've identified women as the source of an imaginary subjugation and emasculation that's been steadily stripping them of power ever since the suffragettes first chained themselves to railings in order to take their right to vote. And damn it, they're mad. Yes, Ben Folds said it best when he observed that, y'all don't know what it's like being male, middle class and white. Okay, once again let's break this down. There's nothing wrong with taking an interest in men's issues, but the concept of men's rights is less about equality between the sexes than it is about maintaining power and privilege over women. Really, Clementine? So male circumcision is about maintaining power and privilege over women? And here I thought it was about a basic human right, or lack thereof. What about the sentencing gap? Or shared custody? Are they about maintaining power and privilege over women too? MRAs, or men's rights activists, don't focus their attention on the structural powers that reinforce rigid expressions of masculinity or advocate for a world in which men aren't unreasonably charged with the sole responsibility of being leaders, soldiers and providers. Okay, so she is talking about the patriarchy here, which does not exist in the modern Western world, with the possible exception of some small groups. But with 40 years of feminists talking down males and masculinity, I think it's time that we, and by we, I mean men, define the term for ourselves. Not what tradition tells us it is, not what feminists tell us what it is, but what we want and need it to be. By the way, Tom Golden gave a very good talk about this topic at the men's conference.
A man's pain is taboo. A man's pain is taboo. You've heard speakers all day today talk about that in certain ways, but a man's pain is taboo. No one wants to touch it. No one wants to hear it. And men are not dumb. They know that. So what are they going to do? Go emote in public? No. They know their pain is taboo. Now, let's do an exercise. I want you to imagine that you're walking into your favorite restaurant. You're walking in your favorite restaurant, and you're walking in to get seated, you're thinking, and you look over in the corner, at the corner table, there's a woman. She's crying. What's the first thing you think about with her? Anybody? What's wrong? Poor dear, she's upset, right? I've asked this question to thousands of therapists in the workshops I give. I'm telling you, they all say the same thing. Poor dear, she must have just broken up with someone. She needs support. How can I help, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Erase that image. Go back, you're walking into the same restaurant. You're walking by, and you notice over in that corner table, there's a guy, and he's crying. What's your first reaction? Get away. Wimp. What else? Drunk. Exactly. This is what I hear over and over again. People immediately come up with that. I came up with that, and I was working with them. You know, this is not something that is just a couple of people. This is almost all of us have this bias that's built in that says, man's pain, get away. There's something wrong with that guy. He's probably drunk. You know, so we're all built to not want to get close to men's pain. Men know this. They know it. They know no one wants to hear this crap. In fact, the guys I'd sit with, they'd look at me and they'd say, do you really want to hear this? They couldn't believe that someone would want to listen to their pain. It's sad. So the first thing that tipped me off was that men's pain is invisible because a man's pain is taboo. Now, there's another one. The provide and protect rule. Oh, boy. So you provide and protect people. Well, guess what? Who's providing and protecting for you? Nobody. Nobody's providing and protecting. Think about it. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You and your wife wake up. There's a big noise down in the basement. Boom! Something goes. Who's going down to check it out?
Not me.
That's a woman said that. Who's going down to check it out? Guess what? In today's world, women may very well say, I'll go down and check that out. And if she did that, she'd be a hero, right? But women's roles are very flexible these days. She'd not only be a hero, but if she said, honey, I really don't want to do that. Can you go? It'd be fine. Nobody get upset, right? There's no problem. Now, how about the guy? If he goes down and checks it out, he's doing his job. Right? That's what he's supposed to do. He is the guy. But if he says, no, honey, I don't want to go, he's a jackass. Can you see the double standard that's going on? Men are expected to never be dependent. Never be dependent. And guess what? You can't emote and not be dependent. The two are linked. They're linked up. So men strive to not be dependent for good reasons because the culture whips them into that. There's a guy named Peter Marin. He wrote this beautiful piece on homelessness and men. But one of the things in the piece stuck with me. And he talked about men and dependency. Listen to what he says. To put it simply, men are neither supposed nor allowed to be dependent. Men are not supposed to be or allowed to be dependent. They're expected to take care of others and themselves. And when they cannot or will not do it, then the assumption at the heart of the culture is that they are somehow less than men and therefore unworthy of help. Get it? An irony asserts itself. By being in need of help, men forfeit the right to it. Does that make sense? A guy comes out and he says, I don't need that help. I'm fine. I'm a man, right? Hey, no problem. He doesn't get the help. But if a guy comes out and he says, you know, I really need some help today, people automatically have a view of him. There's something wrong with that guy, right?
I wonder, does what Tom just described sound familiar?
And that's what it turned
With
into.
a ton of whining.
Oh, a ton
Man,
of whining.
These guys are so whiny. It's incredible.
A man's pain is taboo.
If you haven't seen Tom's talk, the link, as always, is below. You should really check it out if you haven't already. There are important issues here about masculinity and male identity. Of course, feminists always blame this on the patriarchy and offer the solution of, men should be more like women. Next. Instead, they've identified women as the source of an imaginary subjugation and emasculation that's been steadily stripping them of power ever since the suffragettes first chained themselves to railings in order to take their right to vote. And damn it, they're mad. This is just laughable. You should take note of a couple of tricks used by Clem here. First of all, she uses the word women in place of feminists to insinuate that we are just misogynists, as opposed to disagreeing with a cult-like ideology. It is the feminist movement that is responsible for the demonization of masculinity, or at very least, the main culprit. Secondly, Clementine is very good at admitting there are male issues in one line, and then dismissing them the next. She admits there are issues with the male role in society, but then strays off topic to attack those men trying to fix it, by claiming they are just mad at losing their power. What did Tom just say again?
That men's pain is invisible because a man's pain is taboo.
It seems that it's easier for feminists to excuse away male issues, than to actually acknowledge and care about those issues. And any male trying to discuss those issues, is either a wimp, or hates women, or a racist or whatever. We see this type of shaming language over and over again from feminists. Anything to get us to shut up. Yes, Ben Folds said it best when he observed that, y'all don't know what it's like being male, middle class and white. Yeah, the thing is, we are not all male, we are not all middle class, and we are not all white. So once again, we have an attempt to distract from the real issues, and instead attack an MRA straw man. Next. When you look at what constitutes female privilege in the eyes of MRAs and RIs in training, you see exactly how ignorant most of them are to real discrimination and fear. In the MRA handbook, female privilege is being able to speak to men without being considered predatory. It's being able to decide whether or not to continue with a pregnancy as opposed to having a child forced on you so that a scheming bitch can rob you blind for the next 18 years. It's being able to have sex with a man and then later change your mind while accusing him of rape. It's having the right to leave a marriage because the courts will favor you in a custody dispute. It's receiving the coveted status of being a rape survivor on a college campus and all the advantages that come with that. Okay, let's break this down. When you look at what constitutes female privilege in the eyes of MRAs and RIs in training, you see exactly how ignorant most of them are to real discrimination and fear. Okay, so let's ask a feminist what female privilege is.
We're now going through an amazing and unprecedented moment where the power dynamics between men and women are shifting very rapidly. And in many of the places where it counts the most, women are, in fact, taking control of everything. In my mother's day, she didn't go to college, not a lot of women did. And now, for every 2 men who get a college degree, 3 women will do the same. Women, for the first time this year, became the majority of the American workforce. And they're starting to dominate lots of professions: doctors, lawyers, bankers, accountants. Over 50% of managers are women these days, and in the 15 professions projected to grow the most in the next decade, all but 2 of them are dominated by women. So the global economy is becoming a place where women are more successful than men, believe it or not. And this economic changes are starting to rapidly affect our culture, what our romantic comedies look like, what our marriages look like, what our dating lives look like, and our new set of superheroes. For a long time, this is the image of American manhood that dominated: tough, rugged, in control of his own environment. A few years ago, the Marlboro Man was retired and replaced by this much less impressive specimen, who is a parody of American manhood. And that's what we have in our commercials today. The phrase firstborn son is so deeply ingrained in our consciousness that this statistic alone shocked me. In American fertility clinics, 75% of couples are requesting girls and not boys. And in places where you wouldn't think, such as South Korea, India, and China, the very strict patriarchal societies are starting to break down a little, and families are no longer strongly preferring firstborn sons. If you think about this, if you just open your eyes to this possibility and start to connect the dots, you can see the evidence everywhere. You can see it in college graduation patterns, in job projections, in our marriage statistics. You can see it in the Icelandic elections, which you'll hear about later. And you can see it in South Korean surveys on son preference. That something amazing and unprecedented is happening with women. Women are a majority of the workplace. In labor statistics, women take up most managerial jobs. This second set of headlines, you can see that families and marriages are starting to shift. And look at that last headline: young women earning more than young men. That particular headline comes to me from a market research firm. They were basically asked by one of their clients who was going to buy houses in that neighborhood in the future. And they expected that it would be young families or young men, just like it had always been. But in fact, they found something very surprising. It was young single women who were the major purchaser of houses in the neighborhood. And so they decided, because they were intrigued by this finding, to do a nationwide survey. So they spread out all the census data, and what they found, the guy described to me as a shocker, which is that in 1,997 out of 2,000 communities, young women were making more money than young men. So here you have a generation of young women who grow up thinking of themselves as being more powerful earners than the young men around them.
So I guess female privilege is being able to claim oppression when clearly you are not oppressed. Next. In the MRA handbook, female privilege is being able to speak to men without being considered predatory. Well, when 40 years of feminist propaganda has painted all men as potential rapists and pedophiles, I think we have a problem. Next. It's being able to decide whether or not to continue with a pregnancy as opposed to having a child forced on you so that a scheming bitch can rob you blind for the next 18 years. I covered this in detail in my last video, so I will go on to the next claim. It's being able to have sex with a man and then later change your mind while accusing him of rape. Let me think, has such a thing ever happened?
Activity right on a public street made its way from the college town of Athens to world headlines. A woman claimed it was a case of rape, but ABC 6's Tom Bosco is live in Athens now to explain why charges won't be filed. Tom?
Yeah, Bob, it happened right here. A man and a woman, both Ohio University students. What they were doing here was caught on tape. Now, the woman said it was rape, but the law didn't see it that way. They'd been drinking at separate parties, then met at a bar. After closing time, they ended up here, leaning against the side of a bank, where the man was photographed and videotaped performing a sexual act on the woman. After the woman saw the video online the next day, she filed a charge of rape. But today the prosecutor announced the grand jury refused to indict, saying it was all consensual.
She had a smile on her face at one time, grabbed the back of the male's head at another time.
Keller Blackburn says it appeared on video the man asked if he should stop.
Both the suspect in this case and witness reported that conversation took place, and she said, no, go ahead, continue.
The prosecutor says they left the bank, went to a restaurant where their antics earned them free burritos.
And of course, no charges were laid against her. As I said earlier, as long as there are no repercussions for making a false rape claim, there will always be some people making them. And if we class sober regret over drunken sex as rape, then the number of male rape victims just went through the roof. Oh, but wait, we have a hypocritical different standard for males and females, don't we? Thanks, feminism. Next. It's having the right to leave a marriage because the courts will favor you in a custody dispute. Imagine a woman is in an abusive relationship and decides to leave. The odds are overwhelmingly in her favor that she will get custody of her children. Now let's reverse the genders. Imagine a man is in an abusive relationship and decides to leave. The odds are overwhelmingly in his ex-wife's favor that she will get custody of her children. This gives women a choice men do not have, unless they wish to lose contact with their kids. And of course, this doesn't just apply to abusive relationships. When women get divorced, they just lose a husband. When men get divorced, they lose a family. Next. It's receiving the coveted status of being a rape survivor on a college campus and all the advantages that come with that. For some reason this last claim links to an article by Jessica Valenti, who discusses an article by a Washington Post journalist, who to my knowledge has zero connection with the men's rights movement. Links to both articles below. Both articles discuss campus rape, but I can see no connection to men's rights in either. So I guess I could just dismiss this last claim by Clementine outright. But I think I will tackle it anyway.
At Princeton University, a female student who was an alleged victim of an earlier rape and a sex assault victim advocate falsely accused a man of rape at a Take Back the Night rally, and her friends started a gossip campaign against the man she accused. But after her accusation became public and a formal investigation of her complaint turned up nothing, she printed a retraction in the campus newspaper, the Daily Princetonian, which is available online. I think it deserves to be quoted at length. She says, I wish to make the community aware that some of the statements I have made recently on the editorial page of the Daily Princetonian and at the Take Back the Night March have been incorrect. I believe it is absolutely essential that I clarify my story so that no unfair accusations continue to be made by myself or others against any of my fellow classmates or other members of the university community. Despite my comments to the contrary, I never brought any official charges of sexual harassment or assault against any Princeton student. Consequently, no student has ever been dismissed or suspended from Princeton University as a result of a sexual harassment or assault offense committed against me. I never intended for anyone to be hurt by my statements, and I wholeheartedly apologize to anyone who either took offense or felt as if they were personally injured by my letter and speech. Rather than attempting to achieve any type of revenge toward my alleged assailant, I made statements in the Daily Princetonian and at the Take Back the Night March in order to raise awareness for the plight of the campus rape victims. Although I want sympathy and support for my fellow victims, I do not want to create an uncomfortable academic or social environment for any other Princeton University student. Because of these comments, a certain individual has been wrongly accused and is being pursued for a crime he did not commit. Although I have never met this individual or spoken to him, I would like to utilize this public forum to specifically apologize to him. In fact, the student I identified as my assailant in conversation with many members of this community was not the person who raped me. He coincidentally left Princeton on his own accord around the time I was raped, but his leaving the university for personal reasons and my rape are completely unrelated. I urge students who are knowledgeable of this situation to cease blaming this person for my attack. In several personal conversations, and especially at the Take Back the Night March, I have been overcome with emotion. As a result, I was not as coherent or accurate in my recounting of events as a situation as delicate as this demands. I hope this letter definitively clarifies all questionable aspects of my story. 2 years ago, I made the decision not to prosecute the true assailant. Now I do not have the right to make unfounded statements about others. Therefore, I once again apologize to any individuals who have been personally injured or verbally attacked as a result of my statements. This statement is one I have chosen to make voluntarily. Thank you for listening.
That clip was from the Rape Hysteria by Students series by Jonathan Taylor. Link below. If you haven't checked out the series and his channel, you should. So we have a story of a young woman who got caught up in the emotions of a rally, probably listening to the stories of others, and decided to join in by making a false allegation. I am not suggesting that all, or even the majority of rape cases are like this, but it's not inconceivable that an individual would make up a story to fit in, get attention, or sympathy. I'll link below to an article called, Why Do Some Falsely Claim to Be Victims? I'm not going to go into the article in any great depth here, due to time, but I would recommend you read it in its entirety. The last couple of paragraphs state, false report claims typically fit widely accepted cultural narratives, such as a gay waitress being the victim of homophobic slurs, or a young black woman being targeted by racists, or a young white woman being attacked by a black man. Many false reports are committed as a way to bring attention to legitimate social problems such as racism, sexual harassment, sexual assault and hate crimes. By adopting the public image of a victim and a social justice crusader, the hoaxer not only enjoys the sympathy and public support of others who support their cause, but also the attention. By implicitly aligning the false claims with a larger, valid social issue, the hoaxers discourage a close examination of their claims. Those who are suspicious may be reluctant to question the victim's claims out of fear of the perception of blaming the victim or somehow attempting to discredit a worthy social cause. Who wants to challenge someone speaking out against an important social injustice like racism, rape or a hate crime? Yet asking for evidence is not the same as doubting the victim. Instead, it is appropriate investigative procedure to fully investigate a claim. When police determine that a false report has been made, it is usually in the course of a thorough investigation of the claim. In other words, the deception is uncovered because the claim was taken seriously and fully investigated. When these false reports are eventually exposed, it's not uncommon for the alleged victim's supporters to justify the hoax by saying that it was done for a greater good, and that it doesn't matter whether the specific incident actually happened, because it represents many undoubtedly true and valid similar events. Police who diligently spend dozens or hundreds of hours, not to mention thousands of taxpayer dollars, on a lie understandably do not feel the same way. And, of course, the time and effort spent on false victims is time that could have been devoted to helping real victims or real crimes. But before moving on, I should mention Meg Lanker-Simons, who came to fame last year after receiving rape threats online. This led to a great deal of attention and sympathy for poor Meg, who then led a rally against rape culture. But wait for it, when the police investigated, guess what they discovered? Our dear Meg had been sending the rape threats to herself under a fake name. So yes, my darling Clementine, there are sick individuals out there who do seek the coveted status of being a rape survivor on a college campus. Come to think of it, I suspect Tumblr is probably full of such victim cultists. Next. With the exception of that last one, which is so despicably offensive that it's almost impossible to believe it was not only printed in the Washington Post but that it was written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, all of these examples of female privilege seem less indicative of a rising giantarchy poised to crush whimpering men with a gigantic, comfortably shod foot than they do just basic rights that women are entitled to have, even though they prevent men from being able to behave exactly as they like. Women don't come to life the moment men approach us, and asking that men respect our space and not assume their presence is always or even ever welcome isn't the equivalent of Stonewall. Similarly, until science can figure out how to make Ivan Reitman's terrifying vision of the dystopian universe presented in seminal 90s movie Junior a reality, it is not female privilege for a woman to have the final say over whether or not she grows a fetus inside her for 9 months before birthing it and then raising it. And while we're at it, can we all agree that it's a curious bit of cognitive dissonance to argue about paying for children you don't want in one breath while ranting about how the legal system won't give them to you in the other? Notice here her use of distractions and shaming language in place of actual arguments. Once again we hear that if men complain about real issues, it's because they are wimps, or whimpering, or weak. You know, the same old shit. Isn't that right, Tom?
That men's pain is invisible because a man's pain is taboo.
Women don't come to life the moment men approach us, and asking that men respect our space and not assume their presence is always or even ever welcome isn't the equivalent of Stonewall. You know, I don't have a problem with women having their own space, be it their personal space, or women as a group. But should not men have the same right? Even more so when it comes to discussing important issues that affect us. Yet it seems, according to feminists, we are not allowed such a privilege. Similarly, until science can figure out how to make Ivan Reitman's terrifying vision of the dystopian universe presented in seminal 90s movie Junior a reality, it is not female privilege for a woman to have the final say over whether or not she grows a fetus inside her for 9 months before birthing it and then raising it. Okay, more distraction. As I said in my last video, I know of no MRA who is trying to force abortions on anyone. It's definitely not an MRA goal, nor are there any well-known MRAs preaching such a thing. But as I said in my last video, the right to choose to be a parent or not, is a right that women have, that men don't. And not just through abortion either, as in many states in America mothers can anonymously leave their newborns at the local fire station. Women can opt out of parenthood, men can't. This is most definitely a privilege held by women. And then of course there are things like this.
Hi Wendy, my name is Kendra. How you doing?
Very well, Kendra. How can I help you?
So I've been married for 6 years, and me and my husband just had our first baby girl about 9 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So before we were married, he promised me we would have 2 kids, and now he doesn't want any more. My friends think I should trick him and stop taking my birth control. What do you think, Wendy?
I'm embarrassed to say this because I don't like spousal lying. However, men have never been in control of our bodies. We're the ones in control. I'm not going to suggest that you do that, but look into my eyes and tell me what I'm saying. Okay? He promised. Wait, can I just take a quick poll? Clap if you think that she should trick him. My people.
I would like to think that even Clementine Ford would find that last clip disgusting, but no doubt, she would just find a way to twist it into male privilege, or patriarchy, or some other bullshit. Next. And while we're at it, can we all agree that it's a curious bit of cognitive dissonance to argue about paying for children you don't want in one breath while ranting about how the legal system won't give them to you in the other? There is a simple solution to this: shared custody. Give the mother and father 50-50 custody. As for fathers opting out of parenthood, I covered that in my last video. But to break it down and sum it up, mothers have more choices than fathers. Mothers can opt out of parenthood, fathers can't. Mothers gain custody the majority of the time, men don't. A man can be forced into fatherhood, even for a child that is not his, or be denied the right to see his children if he wants to. This is also a very tricky subject, as it involves children, who are often caught between two warring parents. No easy solutions here, but we do need to talk about it. Anyway, there is more in the Clementine Ford article, but I have had my fill of it, and I have more to explore before this episode draws to a conclusion. So for now, I say goodbye to my darling Clementine. Feel free to read the rest of the article if you wish, and as always, feel free to comment below.
Let's get ready to rumble!
There is nothing, I'm saying this right now, there is no good reason to side with somebody who considers themselves a men's rights activist, especially someone who fucking spoke at that men's rights activist event. Are you kidding me?
Remember this jerk from earlier?
But you are doing this same thing that the men's rights activists are doing. I'm a sad man who had a bad experience with one woman or a few women, and those individuals are going to make me completely have a one view about an entire group.
My head, I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
Well, as I have stated before, many of my videos take a lot of time to put together. This is to date my longest video, and has taken over a week and a half to put together. As I was halfway through the first segment with my darling Clementine, I came across 3 videos, freshly posted, by Mr. 70's Haircut here. As I started work on the second segment, using the first of the 3 videos posted by Mr. 70's Haircut, Sargon posted an excellent video debunking Mr. 70's Haircut's second video. Link below. Then 3 days ago, Paul Elam, from A Voice for Men, issued a challenge to Mr. 70's Haircut to a debate. And Mr. 70's Haircut replied,
Speaking of misogynists, I woke up this morning to a very interesting tweet from a men's rights activist, Michael. So, as listeners of the show might recall, on the previous Matt and Michael Monday show, I covered the men's rights, the first annual, men's rights conference, where a bunch of sad men got together and instead of bringing up valid points, they attacked feminism and women in general.
And I just really briefly told them to man up.
Yes. Yeah. And it seems like they may have heard you. How do you think you would do in a real live debate where there is more of a response to what you have to say than you laughing at your own unfunny shit? You made a lot of statements about what you think is the weakness of the men and apparently the women of A Voice for Men. How dare those women who are part of A Voice for Men speak up, though? That's what I'm questioning. That's what I'm saying. That implies some sort of strength on your part. Certainly does, buddy. Certainly does. You are being offered a chance to prove it. Oh, boy. I will predict to my readers that the response to this will be either a mocking rejection. Well, mocking truly is, you got that part right.
Like somebody got called short by their wife.
Oh,
by
yes.
their ex-wife.
Yes, it does sound like that to me. He goes on to say that if I don't want to debate another male, that there's other options for me. And he proceeds to go through the other voice for the women's B team, I guess you would call them, of a voice for men. Because the A team is clearly men.
The B team?
They have to be.
B team.
B team. I mean.
Okay.
What?
Nothing. I was just thinking of what a B word that these guys might
Oh,
throw around.
I didn't even think of that. Maybe that is why. Yeah. Well, Paul, crickets you shall not get. Because I accept your challenge, and I accept the original challenge of debating a man. And while the level of testosterone you have may be frightening to me, I accept. And I will bring the maximum amount of testicular fortitude I can muster up in my small-framed feminist body.
Mangina.
As I write this, the debate is tomorrow, so hopefully I will get this video completed and uploaded before then. Normally, I would wish Paul the best of luck when entering a debate, but in this case, do I really need to? I have no doubt that Paul will rip this guy a new arsehole, figuratively of course. That's not a rape threat for any feminist watching. I also predict the Matt, 70s haircut, binder, will resort to talking over and cutting off Paul as much as he can, as he has no knowledge of the subject, nor arguments, nor intellect.
Swift bite to the neck, and the new matriarch is dead.
Okay, I don't have much time left in this episode, as I want to keep it under 2 hours, but I have one more article, and I use the term loosely, to get through before I'm done. It's such a biased piece of shit, it shouldn't take much to debunk it, so I'm going to speed through it. It's called Men's Rights Conference Host Says Women Who Drink and Dance Are Begging for Rape. A recent USA Today article on the inaugural conference for men's rights activists, MRAs, asked whether it marked a kinder, gentler turn to the gender wars. In May, Elliot Rodger killed 6 people after regularly posting misogynistic rants against the oppressive feminist system, and a video warning, "If I can have you, girls, I will destroy you." Oh no. Right from the start we have a false Elliot Rodger claim. Next. In the intervening time, the first inaugural conference for men's issues, hosted by A Voice for Men, faced a successful campaign asking Detroit's Hilton Doubletree Hotel to cancel the event. The petition, which obtained close to 6,000 signatures, pointed out that MRAs were designated a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center in 2012. It continued, MRAs are linked to the recent mass shooting in UCSB, wherein a young man declared that he would exact revenge on all the women who had rejected him. MRAs are linked to false rape statistics, further perpetuating the dangerous myth that women make it up for attention. MRAs are linked to threats of rape and murder against women who dare to speak out against them. Let's see, we have here admittance that feminists are fascists who don't believe in free speech. Another false SPLC claim. Yet another false Elliot Rodger claim. As for false rape claims, I have covered that extensively in this video already. As for MRAs linked to rape and death threats, name them. Just another false claim with zero evidence to back it up. Next. Jacqueline Friedman writes in A Look Inside the Men's Rights Movement, one of their tactics is to put out a cash bounty for personal information including home addresses, places of employment, email addresses, and phone numbers of feminists who upset them. The deluge of hate mail, rape and death threats for those on the receiving end of these witch hunts is hard to describe. Here she quotes Jacqueline Friedman, who in her own article quotes my boobs. Need I say more? And for the record, I, and many other MRAs don't agree with doxing, and that's whether done by MRAs or feminists. Need I mention Justin Vacula?
Hi, Justin Vacula here, YouTuber, blogger, podcaster, atheist activist. So I have a little bit of a problem on the internet. A few hours ago, I was alerted to a feminist on Facebook who had linked my personal address, the names of my parents, and says that she's going to be sending letters to my parents, family members, and people throughout the local community warning about how a dangerous person.
Link below. Next. After news outlets connected Roger to groups in the MRA sphere, Paul Elam, founder of A Voice for Men, asserted that his organization is committed to nonviolence and that Roger was not a member. However, Katie McDonough writes as along that until the moment that he is alleged to have killed 6 women and men, Elliot Rodger was every bit the same as the other men who are defined by their resentment toward women, and their sense of bitter victimization in the world. While she deems it irresponsible to lay this violence at the feet of the men's rights activists with whom Roger seemed to find support for his rage, nonetheless it denies reality to pretend that Roger's sense of masculine entitlement and views about women didn't matter or somehow existed in a vacuum. In 2009, another man who filled an online journal with misogynistic rants killed 3 women at a fitness center. Once again we have the false connection between Elliot Rodger and the men's rights movement, once again no evidence to support it. Next. Former Political Research Associates researcher Chip Burlett has written extensively on how toxic rhetoric can feed violence, and the danger in viewing these perpetrators as mentally disturbed lone wolves. As Burlett said following the murder of abortion provider Dr. George Tiller, right-wing pundits are not legally culpable for the assassination of Dr. Tiller, but they must share some portion of moral responsibility for creating a dangerous environment. Once again, this has nothing to do with the men's rights movement, and is just an attempt to paint us all as violent thugs. No evidence here, no argument, just propaganda. Next. Moral responsibility. While claiming to be a pacifist, Paul Elam has gloried in the idea of a judge who ruled against fathers being doused with gasoline and set afire. He opposes abortion and, it seems, adoption and motherhood too, and wrote a Mother's Day article saying, "If you have a vagina, the blood of all those children, who are abused far more at the hands of women than men, has stained your skin and caked around the cuticles of your fingers." He further argued, progress for men will not be gained by debate, reason or typical channels of grievance. The progress we need will only be realized by inflicting enough pain on the agents of hate, in public view, that it literally shocks society out of its current coma. Would the murders Elliot Rodger committed fit that vision of public shock? Yet again another fucking Elliot Rodger mention. The first article she links to is the former Man Boobs, now using the name, We Hunted the Mammoth. So we can disregard that. Link below. As for the claim that Paul is anti-abortion, you would have to ask him. The article suggests he might be. But the article itself was about abuse of mothers, not abortion. Link below. Next. Then there's Elam's 2010 post about women who go clubbing, accept drinks, make out, and enter a man's apartment, who end up victims of rape. In the most severe and emphatic terms possible, the answer is no. They are not asking to get raped, they are freaking begging for it. Damn near demanding it. The next paragraph goes on to claim that women get raped because they are stupid, arrogant, and narcissistic. The post was scrubbed from A Voice for Men website as of 2014, and Elam claims it was intended as satire on the impossibility of promoting self-protection without being accused of victim blaming. The scrubbing of the post smacks of an attempt to clean up his image, as the organization attempts to mainstream itself to the public. Yet even the satirical message, if we take it as such, is that empty-headed women need to be informed by a man that they face risks and that the solution is for women to smarten up, not address what Katie McDonough calls toxic male entitlement. I haven't read the article, so I don't know the context. And considering the falsehoods in this article so far, I'm not about to take the author's word for it. Next. Other scheduled conference speakers have blamed women for the state of the world because they choose fucking monsters and assholes rather than nice guys, which we assume the male MRAs consider themselves. Asserted that women are demanding desired violence with their behavior. Had another speaker calls consensual violence consent would be a negotiated BDSM situation, not domestic abuse. Equated paying for dinner and not getting sex to a male version of date rape, and argued that when a woman nonverbal yeses conflict with those verbal no's, that the man not be put in jail for choosing the yes over the no. Once again, she links to men boobs. I would just like to point out that, asking men boobs about the men's rights movement, is kind of like asking Hitler about the Jews. Don't expect an unbiased answer. Instead of relying on regurgitation journalism, and just repeating others, she could have actually watched the footage online, but I guess that would require effort. Also notice that she used the term, blamed women, not blamed feminism. Once again, there is a difference. Next. Visiting a Voice for Men's website today, the first thing I noticed was a speaker denouncing feminism as never about gender equality, but always about misandry and blaming men. According to MSNBC coverage, the first day of the conference was attended by over 100 participants, and focused on rants about the evil empire of feminism. Barbara Kay, a columnist for Canada's National Post, claimed that rape on campus is nothing more than buyer's remorse and rape culture, a baseless moral panic. Note, men's rights activists include women. Structural patriarchy and misogyny influence the beliefs of everyone. This is a kinder, gentler turn? Firstly, feminism, and feminists, should not be above criticism. Secondly, I have already dealt with rape on campus extensively this episode. Next. As Jacqueline Friedman writes, you'll find women and, gasp, even feminists in leadership in most of the institutions actually working to make life safer for men. It's feminists who fought a long and recently successful battle to ensure that male victims are included in the FBI's definition of rape. Feminists have ensured that, through the Violence Against Women Act that MRAs oppose, the overall rate of intimate partner violence in the U.S. declined 64% between 1994 and 2010, and that decline is distributed evenly between male and female victims. Look, more regurgitation journalism. The Violence Against Women Act needs its own video, but the name should give you a clue who it's aimed at. Hint, not men. Just one question, if feminists are fighting so hard for men's rights, then why have I never heard one, not one, address the sentencing gap? I would think that would be high on the list if they were really interested in equality. Next. I was proud to be among those feminist women who worked on the campaign to improve the FBI definition of rape. In college, as a committed feminist, I took a course titled, The Masculine Mystique, which analyzed the problems that a patriarchal, homophobic, violent system causes men, especially considering stereotypes against men of color and the disproportionate number of black men in prison, most egregiously for harmless drug offenses. An inclusive gender justice movement is already a part of the feminist sphere, and expanding as women and feminists gain more authority and ability to make change. And here she proves my point. Yes, race is a factor during sentencing, but so is gender. If you are going to discuss a biased court system based on race, then why not also discuss one based on gender? But I guess giving women equal sentences, for equal crimes, would be sexist, wouldn't it? Fucking crazy. Next. The men's rights movement, with its history and present day of virulent anti-woman and anti-feminist hate speech, is not the place to look for a kinder, gentler turn to the gender wars. Don't be fooled by a single pragmatic attempt at portraying a more respectable image. Okay, I'm finally done with that piece of shit, and I think I'm on time. Next. Well, there has been a lot of bashing of the men's rights conference, some of it by people who didn't even bother to watch any of it online, some of it even before it happened. I personally think it was a success, well done Paul and team. And I think many positives came out of it, in my opinion the biggest being this.
That's never happened before, the first ever annual international conference on men's rights. For 3 days, about 200 people attended various sessions at the VFW in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. Sessions on fatherhood, on paternity rights, on stereotypes, on marriage, and on education, issues the attendees felt were biased against men. And when these issues were discussed, men's rights looked pretty possibly okay.
One thing I have noticed in the media coverage, even amongst some of the most biased coverage, is that they are finally admitting that men have issues. They are still creating MRA straw men, spreading lies and propaganda most of the time, But at very least, many of them have admitted that men have issues too. And the fact that they have acknowledged this one thing, is the first step in making change. One last point. You would have noticed over and over in this episode, that those who are against us the most, tend to quote Paul Elam over and over again. They tend to be only a handful of quotes, and almost always out of context. I don't always agree with everything Paul has to say, but I do respect him and his work. But I think this episode should be a good example of how we, and I include myself in this, should be very careful about what we say, as I don't see a point in handing our enemies more ammo. Having said that though, they will twist our words regardless. And it's also highly probable that the Men's Rights Conference wouldn't have gotten the media coverage it has, if not for those comments. And remember folks, don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.
But some of the beliefs that are on your website, which is called A Voice for Men, do make me shake my head a bit, and I'm not quite sure what you mean. You are calling for a push to an end to rape hysteria. What do you mean by that?
Well, precisely what we mean is what we said. We're pushing for an end to hysteria around the subject of rape. We believe rape is a serious problem that needs to be addressed in this culture. But right now, particularly in the United States, we have a lot of academicians and people in government that are pushing statistics about the incidence of rape that are simply not true. We have campaigns identifying all young men as potential rapists. These are hysterical actions, and they are not addressing the problem of rape. Rape is committed by a small number of criminals, often people much like pedophiles that reoffend and have many, many victims. But to class an entire half of the human species as all potential rapists simply because they are male, we find to be hysterical, and we want that to change.
Who does that?
It's a very limited number of people who are doing that, and to, you know, to say that that is the predominant narrative around rape, I think is itself a kind of hysterical reaction. And certainly your reaction where you said that if you were on a rape jury, you would acquit the man on principle, regardless of how strong the evidence was against him, is certainly playing into a hysteria as well, Paul.
I don't think it is. I think when you look at rape shield laws, when you look at the type of prosecutorial misconduct, the number one crime for which the Innocent Project has people released from prison is rape. When you look at the lack of due process, when you look at things here like the Dear Colleague letter that has instructed our universities to suspend due process for young men accused of sexual assault on college campuses, even after they've been exonerated by police. You find that this is not a small amount of people that are involved in this. This is our government, this is our university boards and administrations, and it's happening across the culture in the United States and Canada. So I just have to disagree with you that this is a minority. I think that reading into this and studying up on current law, finding out about the Dear Colleague letter, finding out about what's happening with rape shield laws and how people like Marv Albert were convicted, who actually all evidence points to his being innocent.
Yeah, but only 3% of all rape cases actually end up in a conviction anyway. So, I mean, yes, the problems you are addressing are real and there are injustices, but when only 3% of rape cases end up in a conviction anyway, you could hardly say that the system is flooded with vexatious complaints.
It's not a matter of saying that the system is flooded with vexatious complaints, but please tell the men that have spent 10, 15, 20 years in prison falsely. Tell the young men whose academic careers have been ended by false allegations that this is a small problem. We're not saying that the numbers are huge, but we are saying that a rape allegation alone is enough to destroy a man's life. and it has happened many, many times over. So for the individuals affected by this, we try to pay attention to this problem.
Yeah, for sure.
We are not being hysterical in the way we are being evidence-based in how we approach this, not political.
Yeah, to acquit on principle is quite another thing, though. Paul, very sadly, we are out of time. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.